My name is Gert. But lately, that name has become meaningless. People no longer say good morning to me, don't look me in the eye. I've become background noise, a background they don't even notice. My children call me grandfather, without a soul, without warmth. My grandchildren avoid hugs, as if I'm too fragile to touch. In my own home, I'm a silent figure who gets in the way of the TV. I live in a small house on the outskirts of town. Once upon a time, we bought it with Maria. My late wife loved the silence and the pine trees outside the window. Now the pine trees stand like grave crosses, rustling about the past, about a life that has gone by and doesn't look back. The windows are fogged up, the furniture creaks from loneliness, and the clock ticks not to time, but to oblivion. My children are successful. Oleg has a company, Yulia is a lawyer in the capital. They rarely come, except on major holidays. They're too busy. Dad, you understand, work, deadlines. I nod. I understand everything. Too well. They don't have time for old age, because old age is an inconvenience. It's not productive, it doesn't shine on social media. Old age is a reminder of what they themselves will become. And no one wants to look at that. Every morning I wake up at 5. Not because I have to, I'm just not sleeping anymore. I make coffee, sit in the kitchen by the window. I talk to Maria, quietly so as not to scare the silence. Then I go to the store, a 10-minute walk, but every step is like a reproach to my knees. They ignore me in the store. The young saleswoman doesn't say thank you, even when I silently put the change in a glass jar at the cash register. In the hospital, they listen to me superficially. The doctor, young and confident, speaks quickly, with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Your age, Mr. Gert, is already a diagnosis in itself. That's what he told me. Supposedly, I'm no longer a patient, but a statistic. Every evening I walk home slowly, with a cane. On the way, young people overtake me, with music in their headphones. They don't even turn around when I try to say something. The street is not for old people. It shouts with young voices, and I'm silent. The street passes me by like an old poster on a pole. I keep a diary. At first, for myself, to remember, to record. Now, so as not to forget who I am. It contains dates, when Yulia last called, when Oleg forgot my birthday, when my grandson Maxim said, "Don't touch me, Grandpa, you don't understand anything anyway." These little things are like drops that sharpen a stone. But I remember. I still remember. Sometimes it seems to me that something is rotting inside me. Not my body, but my soul. As if my dignity, once strong as an oak, has begun to rot from within. But there is something else. I feel it, the way you feel the storm before a thunderstorm, invisible, tense. In the darkness of my kitchen, where the clock ticks and the tea cools, a silent rage is born. Not blind. No. Cold. Reasonable. They think I am nothing. But I will still remember who I was. I wasn't always old. Once, when there was still something to lose, I was called by my name, clearly, with respect. Gert Mikhailovich. That's how I was addressed in the meeting room, at negotiations, even in the local administration. I didn't just run a business, I built it with my own hands, from dust and debts. The workshop, the first contracts, then still wooden counters, vans without depreciation, customs officers with eternally empty eyes. I went through all this. I was 36 when I opened my first retail outlet. Then, production. Then, hired workers. I had 60 subordinates. Everyone looked me in the eye. I was not only their leader, I was their rear. People knew, if Gert promised something, he would do it. They feared me, but more, they respected me. And I never allowed myself to be weak. Never. My children grew up in good. I took all the burden off them. They had better things, better schools, trips abroad. I wasn't a gentle father, no. I was strict. But fair. They didn't know what it was like to live on the outskirts, to count pennies, to give up meat to pay for their mother's medicine. They didn't know, and they shouldn't have known. I made sure they had a better life. And that was my main justification before God and before myself. And then everything started to fall apart. Maria died suddenly. A stroke. She simply collapsed in the kitchen, still holding a mug of tea in her hands. It seemed to me that time had stopped then. My hand held her like one holds leaves in autumn, knowing that they would fall anyway. The warmth of the house went with her. I didn't laugh anymore. I didn't tell jokes. It was as if I existed, but I no longer lived. The children then said, "Dad, it's time to rest a little." They meant it was time to step back. From business. From decisions. From them. I was still resisting. I offered ideas, gave advice. But my words were no longer heard. I was politely interrupted, nodded, and not listened to. I gave up. I sold my share of the company, left all the boards, and returned to our old house on the outskirts. At first, it seemed to me that it would be peace. But peace is when you choose silence. And when you are forced into it, it is no longer peace. It is a sentence. I was not perfect. I had sins. I had to do tough things. Throw out partners, break agreements, work with people whose names it is better not to mention. But all this was for the sake of the future. Their future. And now, my son is talking to me through his wife. My grandson asks me not to come to the match because the team is ashamed of the old man in the audience. And you know what the worst thing is? I am not angry with them. I'm angry with myself for making them like this. Too soft a childhood. Too easy a path. In the evening I take out old photos. There I am, still with black hair, holding my daughter on my shoulders. There I cut the ribbon of a new composition. There we are with Maria in the Crimea, she laughs, and I hold her hat because the wind is blowing. I flip through the photos and ask myself, when did it all go wrong? And the silence answers, when did you become superfluous? I thought I had already learned to live in the shadows. That I was used to silence. But there are things you don't get used to. To a condescending tone. To being looked at as if you didn't exist. Until, over the years, you become not a person, but a function, helping my grandfather take out the trash, buying my grandfather medicine, taking my grandfather on holidays so he wouldn't get bored. I don't ask for much. But even that is a burden. Once I asked Oleg to help me with an internet connection, the old router burned out, and the technician from the service doesn't work with pensioners without a smartphone. My son arrived with an expression of irritated fatigue, like a client who hadn't paid on time. He connected it. Didn't say goodbye. At the door he grumbled, "You could figure it out yourself, seriously. Not in the Stone Age." And I once bought him his first computer. In the 90s. For the last time. Yulia, daughter. She calls every Saturday. Exactly 4 minutes and 10 seconds. I timed it. The questions are formulaic. How are you? Have you eaten? Do you need anything? She doesn't hear all my answers because she's already reading something on another screen. Her voice is like an answering machine. Grandchildren. The worst is Maxim. 18 years old. He looks at me as an obstacle. Last spring, when I tried to give him advice, something about discipline and character, he didn't look up from the phone. And then he said coldly, "Don't teach me how to live. You yourself have lived to the point of sitting alone." These words. They didn't disappear. They were etched into my brain like rust into metal. I didn't show the pain. I just smiled and left the room. But in the evening I wrote in my diary, Maxim. March 14th, 6:12 p.m. A look of disdain. The tone is cold, alienated. The phrase, "You yourself live to see that." I started recording everything. At first instinctively. Then concentratedly. I noticed who said what, when and how. I noted names, situations, facial expressions, intonation. As if I was preparing a dossier. But not for the police, for myself. So as not to forget. To have a card. The last time I was in the hospital, I sat in the corridor for 3 hours. I was scheduled for 10 a.m., but they took me in at 1:20 p.m. When I reminded them, the nurse rolled her eyes and hissed, "What are you? All the old people think that the whole world owes them something." I wrote her down too. Anna, 35 plus, short hair, red nails. September 12th. Hospital number 2. They all think that old people don't remember anything. That we are silent means that we forget. But in silence, memory only grows. And I began to feel something new. Not just resentment. It was deeper. Like an echo of the former power that stirred in me. If I were younger, I might have gotten angry, shouted, demanded respect. But old age is not a shout. It teaches something else. It teaches you to wait. And to write. I found an old black book, once it was for business notes. Now it became my register. There were not just names, there were profiles. Behavior. Repetitive phrases. Weaknesses. Mistakes. Human cracks. I looked at them not as a grandfather, but as the person I once was. Predatory. Quiet. Smart. With the patience of a surgeon. I hadn't yet decided what I would do. But inside, a thought was born, maybe my old age is not a sentence. Maybe it's a weapon. It was an ordinary autumn afternoon. The air smelled of wet leaves, and the asphalt glistened with a light rain that had just passed. I was leaving the market, with 2 packages. One with apples, the other with medicine. My old hands were tired. The stick was slipping, my fingers were aching. Several young men were standing at the bus stop. Tall, in bright jackets, with headphones in one ear. Their smartphones were shining like beacon lights. They were laughing loudly, emptily, carefree. I approached slowly. "Excuse me," I began, "couldn't help, take it to the house." A couple of blocks away, one of them, the tallest, with a black cap, looked at me. And laughed. Not jokingly. Not with benevolence. It was the kind of laugh that sounds like a slap in the face. "Help me," he said to his friends, parodying my voice. "What can't you do yourself, Grandpa?" "My grandson is probably already dead from boredom," added another. "Look, he can't forget his slippers, either," and everyone burst out laughing. The package fell out of my hands. The apples rolled across the asphalt, a few were crushed. The plastic packaging with the pills cracked, and the pills scattered like bones on a shaman's table. I didn't bend down. I just stood. And watched. The wind lifted my coat, as if it had opened an old curtain. There was a rumble in my head. And then, silence. So deep that I could hear my heart. And then something inside me broke. No, woke up. I don't remember how I got home. But I remember every thought that arose on the way. It wasn't anger. Not rage. It was an epiphany. Like a person waking up in the dark, I suddenly saw everything, faces, words, scenes. And meaning. I'm no longer a victim. I am a judge. For the first time in many years, I didn't talk to Maria. I didn't turn on the lamp. I didn't make tea. I just sat down at the table. I opened a black notebook. And I started writing. A plan. Not revenge, that would be too primitive. Revenge screams. And I don't scream anymore. My path is silence. Intellectual reprisal. Not through the body, through the mind. Survival is war. And old age is intelligence. I called a few people from the past. Not friends, they've long since left. I called those who remained in the shadows. Old players. Those who remember what I was good at. Those who aren't afraid of grey hair because they themselves made a flag out of it. 2 answered. One from Kiev, the other from Chernivtsi. What do you need, Gert? Just data, I answered. And a little time. I didn't leave the house for the next few days. A map appeared in the house. I painted her like a strategist before an attack, red marks, Yulia, her connections, son, with his tax mistakes, Maxim, weaknesses, behavioral habits, who he depends on. I still love my family. But love does not protect against consequences. I learned to study the enemy. And now, I study my own. Not for destruction, but for discovery. So that everyone can see who they have become. And who made them this way. Because evil is not screams. It is indifference. And my game has begun. It all started small. I knew that a frontal attack was not my path. My body was old, but my mind wasn't. I acted the way I used to build a business, carefully, methodically, through weaknesses. The first was Yulia. She had the image of an ideal family, a career, an expert husband, an A-list daughter. But I knew the truth. I had access to people who don't post photos on social networks, but store data, deals, hidden schemes. One short call and Yulia's husband found out about the unofficial income that she hadn't declared. I didn't say anything. I simply dumped the folder into a shared email account that they both read. They started arguing. And my daughter ran away from home for the first time. I didn't touch my son right away. He was more difficult. But I knew he had a weak spot. Reputation. I found an old acquaintance among the clients, the one Oleg had once refused to invest in, putting himself above him. Now I helped him make a public exposure, a series of posts, a small investigation, an article in a regional newspaper. Nothing illegal, just unprofitable light. The company lost several contracts. I left Maxim for last. I didn't want to ruin him. He could still be saved. I simply arranged the conversation so that he accidentally overheard his parents discussing his uselessness. I made sure that everything sounded exactly as it should, contemptuous, detached. The reaction was instant. He made a scene, slammed the door, and ran to his grandmother on the other side of the family. I didn't wage war. I became a mirror. All their decisions, indifference, pride, I only helped them see themselves. During this time, I remained in the shadows. I sat in the kitchen. I read. I wrote. I called a few old acquaintances who had also become superfluous. We gathered something like a club, informal, silent. People who were not respected, but who were remembered. And they were still good at it. A neighbor boy asked me to show him how to read financial documents. Another, how to fix an old motorcycle. I helped. Without advertising. Without photos on social networks. Gradually, someone started saying hello. Someone asking for advice. And even those 3 guys from the bus stop once saw me at the market. Now I was no longer alone. I was with a local entrepreneur whom I was helping with an audit. One of the guys bowed his head. The other muttered, "Excuse me," I didn't answer anything. And there was no need. My family had changed. Not right away. But there were calls for no reason. Yulia asked how I was. She really asked. Not mechanically. Oleg asked for forgiveness. In a manly way, without tears, without pathos, but sincerely. Maxim came and said that he wanted to learn to think. I wasn't celebrating a victory. It wasn't a victory. It was a balance. Their world was learning to see me again. And I was learning to be silent not out of fear, but out of strength. They didn't thank me. And they shouldn't. I didn't do all this for that. Now there's silence in my house again. But it's not loneliness. It's respect. I didn't become a monster. I didn't destroy. I taught. And so, perhaps in old age there is no strength of arms. But there is the strength of experience, memory, silence, which knows more than any scream. My name is Gert again. And I'm no longer a shadow. I'm sitting in the kitchen. The same cup, the same table. But I'm not the same person I was a year ago. I used to think that old age was the calm after the storm. That it would come as something inevitable, with aching joints, with loneliness, with useless waiting. But I was wrong. Real old age is when you stop being important to someone. When the world stops asking you, what do you think? They stopped asking me. And I made them listen again. I didn't seek triumph. I didn't take revenge with broken doors. My revenge didn't take the form of a fist, it took the form of truth. I made everyone who hurt me face themselves. I didn't take anything, I just opened my eyes. It was a game. Deep, quiet, masterful. Like chess you play in your head, without moving the pieces. Nothing I did brought me back my youth. Didn't bring back my wife. But I got myself back. Now I don't get hugged every day, but hugs are no longer strange. Phone calls are not regular, but they have meaning. People on the street don't applaud, but they no longer look through me. And most importantly, I have weight in my own eyes again. I often think about how we devalue old age. How we hide it in houses with the smell of medicine and leaky taps. How we close our eyes to people who were someone. I look at other older people, in lines, on benches, and see in them what I almost became, a fragment. And I think, what if they were given a chance? Because old age is not the end. It is a stage where silence can speak. Where the body weakens, but the word sharpens. We don't need sympathy. We need memory. To remember who we were. And who we can still be. I am Gert. I am not good, not bad. I am a person who has not been broken. And my old age is not the end. This is a new role. The role of someone who has learned to settle scores silently. Not out of hatred, but out of dignity.
Subscribe and like, and send the video to your friends.